I'm very reflective.
No.
I'm leaning with the hope
Nah.
that Allah have mercy.
Nah.
Alhamdulillah.
Imagine being just hours away from death, knowing that no physical or DNA evidence links you to the crime you are accused of. Yet, here you are, still on death row, waiting to be executed. How would that feel? This was the grim reality of Marcellus Williams, a man who steadfastly maintained his innocence until his last breath. But on September 24, 2024, the state of Missouri executed him anyways. So I had never heard of Marcellus Williams before his execution, but once I learned about his case, it shook me to my core. The details, the questions left unanswered, and the controversy surrounding his fate made it impossible to ignore. So today I want to take you through the story that not only gripped the nation, but also raised some serious concerns about justice. Let's dive into the deeply controversial case that shook the entire world and uncover why this case will continue to spark debate for years to come. Let's run to 1998. Lisha Gayle, often referred to as Lisha Gayle, was a former reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. She had spent several years working as a journalist, a profession where she covered various important issues before deciding to leave her career in journalism to focus on humanitarian work. By the time of her tragic death in 1998, Lisha had dedicated herself to volunteer work, particularly underprivileged communities. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in University City, Missouri, with her husband. On the 11th of August 1998, she was brutally murdered in her home. She had just stepped out of the shower when she encountered an intruder on the stairs. In a horrifying scene, Lisha was stabbed 43 times with a kitchen knife. Hours later, her husband found her lifeless body and made the frantic call to 911. Her murder shocked the community. Her family and friends remembered her as a kind, compassionate woman who devoted herself to helping others. There were no immediate suspects, and despite the bloody shoe prints and fingerprints left behind, the killer remained at large for nearly a year. That's when Marcellus Williams came into the picture, and everything took a strange turn. Marcellus Williams was born in 1969 and faced many challenges growing up, including instability that led him down a troubled path. Williams already had a criminal record that included burglaries and thefts. He was living a transient life, struggling financially and involved in petty crimes. In May 1999, Lisha's family announced a $10,000 reward for anyone with information that could help in her case. Two witnesses, Henry Cole and Laura Asaro, named Williams as the culprit. Williams was already serving a 20-year sentence for robbing a donut shop. So Cole, who shared a jail cell with Williams, claimed that he confessed to him. Cole had already been released before volunteering his information. The second witness, Laura Asaro, Williams' girlfriend at the time of the crime, testified that he had confessed to her and detailed what had happened. She claimed to have found a purse with Lisha's identification in his car. She also testified that she saw scratches on his neck, blood on his shirt, and a laptop in his car. These details had not been mentioned to the public, making her claims seem more credible. A search of Williams' car turned up a St. Louis Post-Dispatch ruler and a calculator that had belonged to Lisha. The laptop stolen from Lisha was also recovered from a man who testified that Williams had sold the victim's laptop to him. On the other hand, Williams denied any involvement in the murder, maintaining his innocence from the start. His trial began in 2001. There was no physical evidence directly linking Williams to the murder. There were no fingerprints, no DNA linking him to the crime scene. The case hinged largely on the testimonies of the girlfriend and the former cellmates. The prosecution admitted that the physical evidence at the crime scene was inconclusive. A shoe print, fingerprints, and hair found at the scene did not match Williams. The knife that was lodged in her neck had traces of DNA, but because the killer wore gloves, it only matched the prosecution team members who handled it after the crime, not the accused. Rather, the prosecution built a case that Williams had committed the murder during a robbery, portraying him as a seasoned criminal. They also highlighted the violent nature of the crime, pointing out the sheer number of stab wounds inflicted on Felicia. On the other hand, the defense argued that there was no solid evidence directly tying Williams to the crime scene and suggested that the state's witnesses were unreliable, especially given their motives. Now, here's where things get tricky. Both of these key witnesses had potential ulterior motives related to personal gain. The primary witness, who claimed that Williams had confessed to him while they were incarcerated together, well, we all know jailhouse informants often testify in exchange for either reduced sentences or other benefits. Though Cole was a free man when he testified, he received a $5,000 reward for his testimony, while the girlfriend did not request any reward for coming forward. It was argued that she too had reasons to cooperate with law enforcement to avoid her own legal troubles or gain some sort of leniency. Her testimony conflicted with certain details about the case, and her motives were questioned by the defense. These issues raised doubts on the reliability of their testimonies, but they weren't enough to overturn his conviction. Despite the lack of physical evidence, the jury found Williams guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death in 2001. So why did the jury convict him? Well, the trial was problematic from the start. Out of 12 jurors, 11 were white, with only one black juror, despite Williams being African American. His legal team raised numerous concerns about the fairness of the trial, arguing that racial bias influenced the proceedings. This is where this case starts to get incredibly frustrating. How can someone be convicted and sentenced to death when the DNA evidence doesn't add up? If that doesn't shake your faith in the system, I don't know what will. It's almost like Williams was doomed from the moment he stepped into that courtroom with everything stacked against him. Following his conviction, Williams was held on death row at Potosi Correctional Center after his trial. He and his legal team fought for years to appeal his death sentence unsuccessfully. One of the most significant points of contention was the absence of physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. His lawyers requested DNA testing on the murder weapon and also other pieces of evidence, hoping that it would exonerate him. He was scheduled to be executed twice, once in 2015 and again in 2017, but both times it was delayed for further DNA testing, bringing hope to those who believed in his innocence. In 2016, new DNA testing was conducted on the knife used to kill Felicia, as well as other items found from the crime scene. The results showed that the DNA found on the murder weapon did not belong to Marcellus Williams, but to another male suspect. His legal team argued that this new evidence should overturn his conviction, or at the very least warrant a retrial, as this cast significant doubt on his guilt. But despite this, despite all the evidence, despite the DNA results, the Missouri Supreme Court denied Williams' appeal for a new trial, and his execution date was set for August 22, 2017. In fact, the governor at the time, Eric Greitens, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, appointed a board to review the case, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story. But everything changed when Governor Mike Parson came into office. In 2023, Parson dissolved the Board of Inquiry, leaving the court to decide Williams' fate. And despite the outcry from human rights organizations, advocacy groups, and even some political figures, the Missouri Supreme Court set a new date for his execution. It felt like the system was more interested in closing the case than uncovering the truth. Williams was again scheduled to be executed on September 24, 2024. Over the years following his conviction, Williams maintained his innocence, until he accepted an Alford plea of guilty in August of 2024. Now, what's an Alford plea? An Alford plea, also known as a best interest plea, allows a defendant to plead guilty to secure a better outcome while still claiming they didn't commit the crime. This can be as a result of circumstantial evidence and testimony favoring the prosecution, and also difficulty finding evidence and witnesses that would help the defense in his case. Unfortunately, both the witnesses who testified against Williams had already passed away by the time of his later appeals, preventing further scrutiny of their testimonies and motives. On August 21, 2024, Williams accepted a plea bargain to change his death sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecutors argued in his favor during the hearing, acknowledging that the DNA on the murder weapon was not his. However, the State Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, opposed this decision and wanted the execution to proceed as scheduled. The Missouri Supreme Court blocked the plea deal on the same day, and Williams' execution date still remained September 24, 2024. A hearing was scheduled to consider his claims of innocence. On September 12, 2024, Judge Bruce Hilton rejected Williams' appeal, stating that the counsel was merely rehashing previous arguments, all of which had already been rejected multiple times by the state and federal courts, and ordered that the execution should proceed as scheduled. On September 24, 2024, the day Williams is meant to be executed, Governor Person denied him clemency, and the case was reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court just hours before his execution. The court denied the request to halt the execution, although some judges stated they would have granted the request. But I guess when it's your time, right? You can never escape your death, even by a second. Despite public pleas, on September 24, 2024, 23 years after his conviction, 55-year-old Williams was executed by lethal injection at 6 p.m. at the Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Missouri. For his last meal, he was served chicken wings and tater tots. His last statement, which was penned down and witnessed, read, "All praise be to Allah in every situation." Marcellus was a devout Muslim during his time on death row. He consistently expressed his faith, maintaining his belief in Allah. His last statement before his execution reflected his religious devotion. This spiritual affirmation showed his commitment to his faith until the very end of his life. His connection to Islam was evident throughout his legal battle, as he spoke of peace and acceptance of his faith according to his religious beliefs. Even in his final moments, he maintained his innocence. It's hard not to feel a sense of injustice here. The DNA on the knife didn't match him, and both witnesses who testified against him had ulterior motives. Yet, the state went ahead with the execution, leaving many, including me, wondering if Missouri just executed an innocent man. To me, this case feels like a modern-day tragedy. Whether or not you believe Williams was guilty, the fact remains the DNA didn't match him. No physical evidence linked him to the crime. How can we as a society justify taking someone's life when we are not even certain they committed the crime? It raises unsettling questions about the death penalty and racial biases in our justice system. What happens when justice becomes more about closing cases than finding the truth? Both the victim's family and prosecuting attorney, Wesley Bell, advocated for changing his sentence to life in prison. They expressed concerns about the handling of the case, particularly regarding the DNA evidence that did not match Williams and issues surrounding witness credibility. The family, who had long been involved in the clemency effort, believed the closure could have still been achieved by allowing Williams to live rather than proceeding with the execution. However, Missouri Governor Mike Person rejected these efforts, supported the execution, believing that no credible innocence claims had been established through the legal process. Marcellus Williams' execution will likely be debated for years to come, especially in light of the unresolved DNA evidence. His death has left many of us wondering how many others might be in the same position on death row with evidence that doesn't quite add up. And I can't help but wonder if Felicia's family will actually feel a sense of justice or be consumed by guilt. This case just proves that our justice system is far from perfect. And when it comes to life and death, that imperfection can be fatal. It further draws attention to the limitations of eyewitness testimonies and informants, both of which played key roles in Williams' conviction. Advocates argue that relying on these forms of testimony, especially in the absence of physical evidence, can lead to wrongful convictions. May the souls of the departed rest in absolute peace. So that's it for today, guys. What do you think? Should Williams' execution have been halted? Could this have been a tragic miscarriage of justice, or was justice really done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear